My name is Nancy, and I am 65 years old. Birthdays at this age don't feel special anymore, just a quiet morning with a cup of black coffee on the old porch where I've grown used to sitting alone. My son, Daniel, has been gone from my life for 4 years after an argument that seemed beyond repair. During those 4 years, I lived in silence. No calls. No letters. Even when I was hospitalized, he never appeared. I told myself I had to learn how to forget him. But on my birthday, I opened the door and saw a gift box sitting on the doorstep. A pure white box, neatly wrapped with a blue ribbon. No one was there, just the morning chill and a shiver running down my spine. I recognized the handwriting on the small card right away. Happy birthday, Mom. Let's begin again. I stood frozen for minutes, my heart pounding in my chest. A gift from the son who once swore he would treat me like a stranger. Why was he back now? What was inside that box? A reconciliation, or the beginning of something far more terrifying? I still remember clearly Daniel used to be such a bright boy that everyone in the neighborhood praised him. Back in grade school, teachers always called him a rare mathematical mind. He arranged everything with an almost obsessive order, chess pieces lined up perfectly straight, books on the shelf sorted by size. I used to think it was just carefulness, his unique trait. But the older he grew, the more I realized that carefulness carried a strange rigidity. As a child, if I changed the way I set the dinner table, Daniel could sit in silence through the whole meal, lips pressed tight, eyes cold, as if memorizing my mistake just to throw it back at me later. Once, when I forgot to buy the exact cereal he liked, he threw the entire bowl on the floor and locked himself in his room for 2 days without saying a word. I once comforted myself, thinking he was simply sensitive, that he would grow out of it. But as he matured, that sensitivity hardened into a kind of pressure that weighed on the entire house. Daniel went off to college, then landed a good job in tech. He came home less often, but each time he did, the distance between us seemed greater. He spoke in clipped, precise sentences, like a report. And the moment I did something outside of what he expected, that familiar frown crept across his face. I tried to find ways to grow closer, but it was as if Daniel only wanted me to follow the script he had already written. Until that fateful day. The house where I lived, the one my parents left me, where I had raised Daniel from the time he was little, suddenly became the center of an argument that could never be undone. Daniel wanted me to sign the papers to transfer the house into his name. He said it was a smart investment, that I was old, living alone, didn't need much space, and that he had bigger plans for business. I looked into my son's eyes and saw none of the little boy who once sat on my lap with a comic book, asking, "Mom, if I do well in school, you'll be proud of me." Right now, standing before me, was a cold man, eyes filled with calculation. I spoke slowly, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Daniel, this isn't just a house. This is memory. This is my whole life. I can't sign it away." He gripped the pen tightly, looked at me, and his voice cut sharp like a knife. "If you're not on my side, then we're no longer family." I was stunned. That sentence wasn't a rash outburst. It was clear, deliberate, and merciless. My heart felt crushed in an iron grip. I thought he would calm down, that maybe after a night's sleep things would be fine. But no. Daniel stood up, shoved the papers into his briefcase, grabbed his suitcase, and walked out the door. The slam of that door was like a blade severing the last thread between us. From that day on, he disappeared from my life. No calls, no Christmas cards, no birthday wishes. Even when I was hospitalized with a severe case of pneumonia, there was no sign of him. When neighbors asked, I forced a smile and said Daniel was busy with work. I didn't want to bother his mother. But inside, I knew the distance between me and my son had turned into a bottomless abyss. Many nights, I sat alone in the living room. The empty chair across from me, a constant reminder of loss. Some nights I held the phone. Daniel's number already glowing on the screen. Just one press away. But I always set it back down. Because I was afraid of the answer, or of the cold silence that would hurt even more. Time went on, and I learned how to live with solitude. I poured myself into tending my little garden, into quiet mornings on the porch. I thought I had made peace with saying goodbye to my own son. That's why, on that morning, when I saw the birthday gift box on the doorstep, I shivered. It wasn't just a present. It was like a door suddenly flung open, dragging the past and all the pain rushing back in. I set the gift box on the kitchen table, my hands still slightly trembling. The morning light slanted through the window, glinting off the blue ribbon tied with flawless precision. Daniel had never been this skillful with his hands. I untied the ribbon, the paper crackling, and inside was a pristine white box. When I lifted the lid, a sweet vanilla scent drifted out. I froze dozens of cookies, neatly arranged, in shapes of blue flowers, yellow leaves, and glittering stars. Each detail was so delicate it looked like artwork. Daniel had never cooked, let alone baked. I could hardly believe it. On the lid, a small card was neatly attached. Happy birthday. Mom. Let's begin again. The sharp strokes of blue ink were unmistakable. I recognized it at once. It was Daniel's handwriting. My heart ached, torn between wanting to believe and fearing to believe. After 4 years of silence. Why today? Why a box of cookies? I stared at them for a long time. I wanted to eat, but my hand wouldn't lift. A voice in my head whispered, what if eating them is a mistake, but if I throw them away, doesn't that make his fragile effort meaningless? I wrestled with myself. In the end, I took a small plastic container, placed a single star-shaped cookie inside, and set it in the fridge. I didn't know why, maybe out of habit, maybe to keep a piece of evidence, or maybe just so I wouldn't erase completely what Daniel had sent. But for the rest, I couldn't. My thoughts turned to Linda, the neighbor next door. She was a few years older, widowed, living alone. Over the years, whenever I was sick, she was the one who brought hot soup, the one who helped me to the doctor. The times I collapsed in the yard, she was the one who called the ambulance. If anyone deserved a little sweetness, it was her. That afternoon, I carried the box over. The walk was short, but each step felt heavy. Linda opened the door, her eyes lighting up. Nancy, it's your birthday, and you're bringing me a gift. I smiled, holding out the cookies. Daniel sent them to me. I thought you might enjoy them more. Honestly, I don't have the heart to eat them. Linda hesitated. Daniel, your son, it's been so long since I've heard you mention him. But these cookies are beautiful, I shouldn't take them. I shook my head gently. Please, just think of it as helping me hold on to a memory. I don't want them to go to waste. She looked at me, her eyes soft, then slowly nodded. Well then, thank you. Nancy, you're always so thoughtful. I walked back home and sank onto the sofa. The house returned to silence. But the empty space on the kitchen table where the box had been felt wider than before it appeared. My eyes drifted to the fridge, where the lone cookie rested inside its container. As dusk fell, streaks of red and orange stretched across the wooden floor. I pressed my hand against my chest. My heartbeat was steady, but heavy. In my mind, the words on the card still echoed. Let's begin again. A part of me wanted to believe Daniel was finding his way back, but another part, clearer, sharper, whispered, no. It's not that simple. I sat still, eyes closed, letting unease seep into every breath. And I knew this was only the beginning. That night the house was so quiet that even the ticking of the clock made me startle. I sat in the living room with the lights off, leaving only the table lamp to cast a pale yellow halo across the tabletop. My phone lay still in front of me, its screen black and lifeless. I told myself, it won't call. After all these years, why would it? But just then, the phone rang. The screen lit up, showing a name that made my heart feel like it might stop. Daniel. My hand trembled. I hesitated for a few seconds, then pressed the answer button. Hello, my voice choked. On the other end, a familiar, calm, low voice sounded. Happy birthday. Mom. Did you get the cake? A rush of emotion flooded me, both soothing and like salt on an old wound. I forced myself to stay calm and answered slowly. Yes. I got it, but I gave it to Linda. The room suddenly felt leaden. I thought the line had dropped. But then I heard Daniel's breath, deep and heavy, very different from his earlier calm. After a moment his voice lowered, tense and whispering. They weren't meant for anyone else. They were only meant for you. Only you. I froze, chilled from head to toe. My fingers clamped the phone until they went numb. Those words echoed in the room like a verdict. Daniel. What do you mean? I asked, my voice shaking. He chuckled softly, but the dry sound made my skin crawl. Nothing. It's just, you disappoint me. But never mind. I know you kept one. Right, the one in the fridge. I held my breath. How did he know I hadn't told anyone? My eyes went to the refrigerator in the corner of the kitchen, where a single cake still sat in a plastic container. It felt as if someone were watching me from the dark. Daniel, where are you? I said, trying to stay calm, where his tone was almost casual, almost normal. Somewhere you'll never go. Unless you really want to. I tightened my grip on the phone, my heart pounded. For a moment memories surged back, little Daniel bursting into my room, proud of a perfect test score, his eyes shining. Now that voice sounded like a warning. Daniel. Why send me cake, after all these years? There was a long silence on the line. Then a sigh. His voice low. Because it's time, you understand. I never really disappeared. I've always been here. You just didn't want to see. I gasped. My hand shook so badly I knocked a cup off the table, and it shattered on the floor. What do you want me to understand? It's okay. You'll understand soon enough. Then the line went dead. I sat there, stunned, and the phone in my hand as heavy as a stone. The house sank back into stillness. Only the dry tick of the clock remained. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside a little. Outside, the street was empty. The pale streetlights cast a lonely glow on the cold sidewalk. No one in sight. But I was sure somewhere Daniel was watching me. I returned to the table, my eyes landing on the small card still there. Happy birthday. Mom. Let's begin again. The blue-inked words now felt completely different. No longer an olive branch. It felt like a cold message. A sign that something was waiting ahead. I sighed and placed a hand on my chest, feeling the heavy beat of my heart. I murmured into the quiet, Daniel, what do you really want from me? No one answered. Only the clock kept marking time, as if counting down to something not yet revealed. I barely slept all night. Every time I closed my eyes, Daniel's cold words echoed in my head. They were only meant for you. Only you. I tossed and turned, my heart restless, as if an invisible hand were squeezing it. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through the curtains. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when the landline rang. I picked up and heard the urgent voice of a woman I knew, Linda's granddaughter. Nancy. Aunt Linda has been taken to the hospital. Last night she was vomiting non-stop, and this morning she fainted. The doctors say it's serious, and they don't know the cause yet. They're treating her at St. Luke's. I went numb, my hand gripping the cup handle so tightly it felt rigid. The words tore through the quiet air. My heart dropped, then raced. "Oh my God, Linda," I could only whisper. After hanging up, I sank into a chair, trembling all over. Linda's face flashed before me, her gentle smile when she accepted the box of cookies from me last night. The warmth in her eyes. And now, she lay in a hospital bed, fighting an apparent poisoning of unknown origin. Guilt flooded me. I was the one who had brought the box of cookies. I, trusting, and a little eager to avoid trouble, had handed over something I should perhaps have kept sealed. If there was something wrong in that box, then I should be the one to bear the consequences. I stood up shakily and walked to the kitchen. The white refrigerator loomed, its door keeping a secret. I opened it. A warm light spilled onto the small plastic container. The star-shaped cookie sat untouched, its sugar glaze glittering like mockery. I reached out, then pulled back immediately. A chill ran down my spine. Daniel's words rang clear. "They were only meant for you." I took a deep breath and lifted the box from the fridge and set it on the table. Every sense in me tightened like a drawn string. I stared at it. My heart grew heavy, as if that tiny cookie held a bottomless darkness. My cell phone rang again. I answered quickly. It was my daughter-in-law, Leah, Daniel's wife. Her voice trembled, as if she'd been crying. "Nancy, I'm calling to tell you about my mother. This morning she collapsed completely. The doctor said the symptoms look like poisoning, but they haven't identified any substance. She keeps mentioning the box of cookies from last night." I clenched the phone, my chest constricting. Yes, that's right. I brought her the box of cookies Daniel sent to me. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the hospital noise shoes clattering, monitors beeping in rapid staccato. Finally, Leah's voice broke. "Nancy, do you think, could those cookies have caused this?" I bit my lip until it bled. Tears threatened. I don't know. I haven't eaten any. I was too afraid. But I kept one. If you suspect anything, please tell me. I beg you." Her voice was nearly desperate. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say the whole truth, that I suspected my own son. But another part clamped down, refusing to heap that guilt onto my only child. "I'll think about it. I'll find a way," I finally managed to say. When I hung up, my legs trembled. I sat down, holding my face in both hands, fear and guilt braided together, pushing me into the dark corner. If Daniel had really done this, then I was his first target. But if he hadn't, would I be accusing my own flesh and blood wrongfully? My eyes passed over the box of cookies on the table. The sugar shimmered under the light like a challenge. I thought of Linda, motionless in a hospital bed. I thought of her eyes, always full of kindness toward me. And a cold thought surfaced. Had I just handed her a death sentence? I paced back and forth in the kitchen. A vague resolve stirred inside me. I couldn't let this remain clouded. I needed the truth, no matter how brutal it might be. Outside, a siren wailed through the early wind. I stood still, feeling my heart pound heavy, and knew from this moment on, there was no turning back. I rose and shuffled into the kitchen, my feet dragging across the wooden floor. The refrigerator still threw a pale yellow light, illuminating the plastic container of cookies. I hadn't yet closed the door when my eyes dropped to the trash can in the corner. Among the wrapping paper and scraps, something stood out. I bent down and gently swept the paper aside. A small, clear plastic vial rolled out unlabeled. A thin dusting of white powder clung to its sides, glinting under the kitchen light. I froze. My hand trembled as I picked up the vial. A cold numbness climbed my arm. I'd never seen it in my house. It wasn't mine. Who had put it here, and why? A whisper ran through my mind. "Daniel." I sank into a chair, and set the vial and the cookie container side by side on the table. Looking at them, I felt as if I were facing a pair of strange pieces of evidence. One was beautiful and glittering, like a birthday gift. The other was cold, opaque, ominous. Together they hinted at a horrifying truth waiting to reveal itself. I covered my face with my hands. If it was all baseless suspicion, then I would be destroying my son in my own mind. But if it wasn't, if the truth was what I feared, then I needed to know. I needed certainty. In that moment I thought of Karen, an old high school friend. She now worked at a medical laboratory in the city. We called each other occasionally but hadn't seen one another in a long time. Karen was discreet, and she owed me a favor from long ago. I reached for the phone, my hand still shaking. After 2 rings, Karen's hoarse but familiar voice came through. Nancy. Oh my God. It's been ages. What's wrong? Calling me at this hour, I hesitated, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen, I need your help with something. But it has to be discreet. There was a pause on the other end. Then Karen's tone dropped. What is it? You're making me worry. I looked at the small vial on the table, its shadow stretched long across the wood. I swallowed hard. I have a sample of food and a strange little vial. I need to know what's in it. Could you test it for me? No paperwork? No formalities. I just need the truth. Karen Seahead. Then replied Nancy. You know I'm not supposed to do that. But hearing your voice, I can tell this isn't small. Okay, bring it to me. But be careful. Don't let anyone know. Hot tears sprang unexpectedly to my eyes. I wiped them away and nodded as if Karen were sitting in front of me. Thank you, Karen. I owe you again. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the morning sun had spread across the porch. But inside I felt only darkness. I carefully put the cookie into a hard plastic container, wrapped the vial in a plastic bag, and placed both into a sturdy cloth bag. I secured the bag and tucked it under the chair. In that moment I realized my home no longer felt safe. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind slipping through a crack in the door sent a shiver through me, as if someone might be hiding nearby. I looked around the kitchen and told myself I may no longer be the old Nancy, the woman who arranged flowers, drank tea, and sat listening to the birds. I must be different. I must be strong, or I won't survive. I put on my coat and prepared to leave. When I glanced back, the small vial lay in the bag, silent but threatening. I knew that from now on, every step I took and every word I spoke would bring me closer to a truth I might never before have dared to face. The road to Karen's laboratory that morning was unusually quiet. The rows of trees were stripped bare, and the chilly, early winter wind made me shiver. I drove slowly, both hands gripping the wheel. The bag on the passenger seat felt like a heavy weight. Every time I glanced at it, my heart tightened. Karen was waiting for me in the parking area behind the building. She wore a white lab coat, her brown hair tied back, looking stern but warm. The moment she saw me, she hurried over. Nancy. What's wrong? You look like you're about to collapse. I took her hand. My voice choked. Just promise me. Don't ask too many questions. Please check this for me. I need to know what's inside. I set the cloth bag in her hands. Karen studied me, suspicion in her eyes, then nodded. Okay, I'll do it right away. Wait in the car, don't let anyone see. I sat in the car, turned on the heater, but my insides felt frozen. Time crawled, each minute stretched like an hour. I watched through the glass as Karen went back and forth inside. Every time a door opened, my heart leapt into my throat. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, Karen came out quickly, her face grave. She opened the car door and sat in the passenger seat. She held a printed sheet of paper, still warm from the copier. Nancy? Her voice dropped. I ran the tests several times to be sure. There is a toxic alkaloid in the cookie. It's called aconitum. People also call it monk's hood. It's extremely dangerous. Even a small dose can paralyze the nervous system and stop the heart. I went numb. My ears rang. The noise of traffic outside faded away. My vision blurred as if a fog had closed in. I murmured monk's hood. My God. Karen put a hand on my shoulder. Her eyes resolute. Nancy. This cannot end up in food by accident. This was deliberate. Someone put it there to harm someone. I clutched the edge of the seat, breathing hard. Images of Daniel flashed in my mind. The boy sitting at the kitchen table at 8, carefully folding napkins into triangles. At 10, furious when I rearranged the spice jars. At 12, silent for a week because I bought the wrong ketchup. Back then I thought it was just a perfectionist streak. Now the little memories gathered into a terrifying picture. I said softly, almost to myself. Since he was small, he was obsessed. He loved books on plants and ancient medicine. Once I saw him crushing leaves from the garden, mixing them with water, watching like he was running an experiment. I asked, and he just smiled, saying he wanted to study poisons. I thought it was childhood curiosity. Karen looked at me. Serious, Nancy. You have to report this to the police right away. I turned away. Tears ran down my cheeks. Karen. He's my son, she exhaled. Paused a few seconds. Then spoke quietly. I understand. But Nancy, the truth is the truth. Without evidence, Linda may never wake up. And you were the intended first target. I faced the window. The road ahead was hazy. Dry leaves whirling in gusts. I felt my heart crack. One side was the motherly instinct. The other was an undeniable truth. I'm not ready, I whispered. At least, I need to hear it from his own mouth. Karen squeezed my hand gently. If that's the case, you must be extremely careful. But Nancy, don't underestimate the danger. The person who put poison in food is no longer a curious child. That's someone who plans. I nodded. My vision blurred. The test result in Karen's hand felt like a knife to my chest. Aconitum. One word. And everything collapsed. On the drive home, the familiar road suddenly felt foreign. I stopped at the front of my house, shut off the engine, and sat for a long time. Wind blew hard, dry leaves scattered everywhere. A single question echoed in my head, Daniel. Why me? I went inside, locked the door behind me, and sank into a chair. On the table, the card with the words, "Let's begin again," still lay there. I picked it up and stared at each firm blue stroke. My mind spun. What does begin again mean? Could it be that for Daniel begin again didn't mean reconciliation, but complete erasure, even of me? Of the one who gave him life. I buried my face in my hands, my chest aching. I knew that from this moment on, a mother's love would no longer be enough to protect me. I had to face a stark, brutal truth. No matter how painful my son might have become, someone who would try to take his mother's life. That afternoon I drove to the city police station. The sky was bleak and heavy with clouds, and the wind slapped the windshield. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the gray building. Never in my life had my steps felt so heavy. When I went inside, the officer at the desk asked what I needed. I kept it short. I need to see a detective. About a case, possibly poisoning. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man appeared, tall and thin, wearing a white shirt with a loose tie. He introduced himself as Detective Mark Harris. His voice was calm, his eyes bright and sharp, but not cold. He led me into a small room where only a notepad and a pen sat on the table. I sat down, my hands clenched together to keep steady. You can start from the beginning, Harris said in an even, low voice. I took a deep breath and told him everything: the box of cookies on my birthday, the card that read, "Let's begin again," The chilling words over the phone. They were only meant for you. Only you. And finally, the test result Karen had given me, aconitum. A deadly toxin. While I spoke, Harris barely interrupted. He took notes and occasionally looked up at me, his eyes seeming to read the silences between my words. When I finished, the room was so quiet I could hear the pen scratching on paper. Harris leaned back for a long moment, thoughtful, then said, "Ms. Nancy, if what you're saying is true, this is no longer a misunderstanding. This is a deliberate plot." I bit my lip. It felt like my heart was being squeezed. But that's my son. Could there be some mistake? Could he not know about the vial? Could someone else have interfered? Harris looked at me. Not harshly, but frankly. I understand you're his mother. It won't be easy to accept. But the truth is, someone became seriously ill after eating those cookies. And you kept one that tested positive for a toxin. If you hesitate, there could be more victims. I sat silent. My grip so tight my fingernails left marks in my skin. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think there was a third party, some invisible hand at work. But deep down I knew there was only one real answer. Harris continued slowly. We need the cookie sample and the vial. If you agree, we'll send them for formal analysis. At the same time, we'll begin monitoring Daniel. But I'll need your full cooperation. Are you willing? I looked down at the table, my eyes blurring. Images of little Daniel came to me, the child who hugged his teddy bear every night, who cried when he fell off his bike. How could that boy become someone who put poison in a box of cookies intended for his mother? I swallowed and whispered, I will bring everything to you. But please remember, he is still my son. Even though I can't deny what's happening. Harris nodded, his expression softening. I understand. But if your son did this, stopping him is also how you protect others, and protect yourself. I bowed my head. A tear fell onto the paper he had just written. I wiped it away and nodded. After the meeting, I returned home as dusk fell. The streetlights cast a pale yellow glow down the empty road. I sat in the car for a long time, looking at the familiar house and feeling it strange. Inside, the cookie and the vial waited, two silent pieces of evidence. I went in, locked the door, and collapsed into a chair. Harris's words echoed in my head. If you hesitate, there could be more victims. I cupped my face in my hands, my heart heavy. I knew I had stepped into a dangerous place where motherly love and the truth no longer traveled the same road. I didn't sleep all night. I sat at the table with the small portable recorder I'd just bought, still smelling of new plastic. I turned it over and over in my hands, racked with guilt. I'd reported to the police. But Harris had been clear. You need direct evidence. And I knew, if anyone could make Daniel slip up, it would be me. The next morning I drove to the complex where Daniel lived. The narrow street was shaded by trees. The houses around looked tidy. But when I stopped at my son's door, my chest tightened. The gray brick building felt cold. The windows shut and the curtains drawn. It looked less like a home and more like a shell hiding something inside. I tucked the recorder into my coat pocket, took a deep breath, and knocked. After a moment, the door opened. Daniel appeared, his face much thinner than the last time I'd seen him. His eyes ringed with shadows, a faint smile on his lips. Mom, what a surprise. I didn't expect you. I forced a smile. I just wanted to see how you were and ask about Ruth. Daniel stepped aside, motioning me in. The moment I entered, I shivered. The air inside was cold, with a sharp smell of dried herbs. Everything was two neat books lined up by size. Glass jars filled with dried leaves and roots, labels covering them all. The whole room looked like a laboratory, not a home. I walked slowly, my eyes scanning the tall shelves of jars. Daniel followed close behind, his voice even. I'm just researching. People watch movies for fun, me. I like studying plants. You know I've always been like that. I turned to him and looked straight into his eyes. You sent me the cookies. But you know I don't eat them. Daniel smiled. A thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. You should be the first to try. If others eat them, it just spoils things. His words made me shiver. I forced myself to stay calm and sat in a chair near the dining table. My hand brushed the recorder in my pocket. I made sure it was still on. Linda said the cookies were beautiful. I said slowly. She liked the star-shaped one the most. For a moment Daniel's smile vanished. A cold flash lit his eyes. Like a knife in shadow. He answered immediately. Without hesitation. The star. Huh, yeah. I know. She always picks the flashy ones. I made that one carefully. My heart pounded. I had never told Daniel which cookie Linda ate. So how did he know? The answer was so obvious, it left me breathless. I forced myself to ask more. When did you start baking? I don't remember you ever being in the kitchen. Daniel stood, walked to the sink, and poured a glass of water. His voice was calm. Too smooth. Only recently. I needed a new hobby. Baking helps me relax. I watched his movements, imagining Linda lying still in the hospital. Harris's words rang in my head. If you hesitate, there could be more victims. My lips trembled, my chest ached. The man in front of me was still my son. But he was also a stranger, dangerous. Daniel turned, smiling again. But there was no warmth in his eyes. Don't worry, Mom. Next time I'll prepare something, just for you. No one else. I clenched my hand in my pocket, my fingers trembling against the recorder. I knew that the words he had just spoken, each one would be crucial evidence. At the same time, they tore my heart into pieces. I stood and forced my voice. Steady, I have to go now. I just wanted to see you and hear you say a few words. Thank you for seeing me. Daniel tilted his head, a half smile on his face. You're always in a hurry. Mom, that's okay. We'll have plenty more chances to talk. I stepped toward the door. As my hand touched the knob, I glanced toward the kitchen. A towel lay half-draped across the counter. And beneath it, I glimpsed the corner of a glass jar, just like the vial I'd found in the trash. Daniel followed my glance for a moment, then stepped forward as if by chance to block my view. I smiled weakly and opened the door. The cold air hit my face and I felt easier than I had inside that herb-scented house. I walked to my car. And as the door slammed shut, I pulled the recorder from my pocket and checked the indicator lights still blinking. My whole body trembled. My son had just confessed with his own voice. And I, as his mother, had recorded the darkest moment of my child's blood. I sat in the car for a long time, my hand still clasping the recorder. The tiny indicator light blinked, like another heart beating with mine trembling. Out of rhythm. Panicked. I took several deep breaths, trying to steady the queasiness in my stomach. Finally, I told myself I had to go back. Ask more. Make Daniel slip. If I stopped now, the police might think I was obsessed and inventing things. I couldn't let it stay unclear. I opened the door, turned back, and knocked again. Daniel answered. Surprised. Did you forget something? Mom, I pressed my lips together and walked in, keeping my face as calm as I could. There are a few things I didn't get to ask. Daniel raised an eyebrow, shrugged, and motioned for me to sit at the table. I hid my hand in my coat pocket and clicked the recorder on again. The apartment felt strangely quiet. I sat down, looked him straight in the eye, and asked slowly, "Where did you learn about that powder?" Daniel paused, but only for a moment, like a shadow passing across his face. He smiled, but it held no warmth. There are things they don't teach you in school. Mom, you just have to know the right dose. The words were soft as wind, but they rang in my ears like a judgment. I felt a chill run down my spine. Every hair on my arms stood up. My gaze accidentally swept the shelves, dozens of glass jars stacked neatly with scrawled labels digitalis. Belladonna. Atropa. Aconitum. My heart clenched. This was not a harmless hobby. This was an arsenal. How long have you been doing this? I asked. My voice hoarse. Daniel tilted his head and tapped his fingers on the table. Quite a while. You know me, I'm patient. Others explode in anger. I save up. The words choked me. I remembered how he could go silent for a week as a child over a small mistake I made. He didn't forget. He kept it. And now it had become something far more terrifying. I fought to keep from shaking. But my voice wavered. Daniel. What do you want to do with me? He smiled faintly, leaned toward me, and whispered, You don't understand. Sometimes, to have a new beginning, you have to remove the old things. I squeezed my hand in my pocket so hard my nails dug into my skin. The recorder's light kept blinking. I bowed my head and hid the tear that slipped down. I have to go, I said quickly, standing. Daniel shrugged. Calm as ever. Up to you. But you'll come back. I know you will. I didn't answer and hurried for the door. As I stepped into the hallway, my legs nearly gave out. I grabbed the banister and panted. The recorder felt heavy in my pocket, like a bomb that had just been armed. I got into the car, locked the doors, and turned on the heater. It took me a long time to calm down enough to replay the recording and hear Daniel's voice again. There are things they don't teach you in school. Mom, you just have to know the right dose. Each word came out cold as steel. I bowed my head onto the steering wheel and sobbed. I knew this recording would be evidence. It would prove Daniel wasn't innocent or misunderstood. He had said it himself. But at the same time, my heart tore apart. This was my son, the child I cradled, the one I lulled to sleep with clumsy songs. Now he spoke of poison with chilling indifference. I drove home with trembling hands on the wheel. Dusk fell, and tree shadows stretched long across the empty road. I kept asking myself, what did I miss? How did I raise a child who became this? Once home, I locked the door and collapsed onto the sofa. The recorder sat on the table, its red light finally off. Silent. I looked at it as if it were a piece of evidence turned against my own flesh and blood. In the quiet house, I whispered, Daniel, I never thought the day would come when your own voice would be proof against you. My words faded into the air. Outside, the wind moaned through the dry branches like fate, sighing. I knew from now on the path I walked could never be retraced. A few days later, I was called to the police station to meet Detective Harris. The room was the same wooden table, metal chairs, the flat glow of fluorescent lights. Harris sat across from me, and his face more tense than usual. On the table, he placed a thick file. Mrs. Nancy, we've expanded the investigation. The results won't be easy to hear. Harris began, his voice low and steady. I nodded slightly, my hands clasped tight, bracing myself for whatever came. Harris opened the file and showed me several printed pages. They were transcripts from an online forum, a black background with glowing text, posted under a strange username Mandrake Chugoshu. This account has been identified as Daniel's, Harris explained. He's used it for years, posting in closed forums about herbs and toxins. Not the kind of place just anyone can access. It's where people who are obsessed with poisons gather. I stared at the printed words, each one clawing at my eyes. Extracting aconitum requires drying the root first, grinding it fine, mixing with ethanol to release the alkaloid. Small doses cause numbness, larger doses stop the heart. Always test on animals before moving to the main subject. I froze, my hands dropping limp. My God, the main subject. Who does that mean? Harris didn't answer immediately. He pulled out a worn leather notebook. Its edges frayed. We found this in Daniel's study. A personal journal. Neighbors confirmed no one else came and went regularly. This is his handwriting. I opened it. Each page held meticulous notes. The sharp handwriting so familiar. Dates. Formulas. Observations after each trial. Then my heart stopped when I read a line Mother will never understand. But she will have to taste. Only then can the past end. I covered my mouth as tears spilled over. The notebook slipped from my hands onto the table with a soft thud that sounded like thunder to me. Detective Harris, what did I do wrong for my son to write this about me? I choked out, my voice breaking. Harris looked at me with a trace of sympathy. There are no gentle words for this, Mrs. Nancy. But the evidence, we have the secret forum. The poison vials. The journal all point in one direction. Daniel has been planning this for a long time. I shook my head. Crying. Whispering, I gave birth to him. I raised him. Why has he turned me into the test subject? Harris stayed quiet for a moment. Then spoke softly. Some people can't be explained through maternal love. But you must remember it was your courage. Keeping that cookie. Finding the vial. Bringing us the recording that stopped something worse from happening. I wiped my tears. But my heart still bled. Every word in that journal cut like a knife. Carving into me the truth Daniel was no longer the boy I once held close. He had become someone else dangerous. Unfamiliar. Harris went on. We also found several other jars of dried powder in his home. Labeled with his own code. Preliminary analysis shows compounds from digitalis and belladonna. Together, these can create powerful effects on the heart and nervous system. I shuddered. My hands clutching each other. He prepared everything. Harris nodded. Yes. But the journal shows something else. Daniel didn't only write about his mother. There are vague notes about a replacement woman and a lesson for the betrayer. We suspect he may have targeted others as well. Mrs. Linda's poisoning may have been only the first step. Even if it wasn't what he intended. I sat frozen, gasping for breath. The thought that Linda, kind neighbor, who had helped me so many times when I was weak, was just a replacement, chilled me to the bone. Detective Harris, I said, my voice shaking. Promise me, if possible, save Daniel. Don't let him turn into a monster completely. Harris sighed and closed the file. I can't promise what you ask, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to stop him. And to protect you. I bowed my head, my shoulders trembling. I knew that from this moment on, every hesitation, every fragile hope had been stripped away. The truth stood before me. Undeniable. That journal, with its cold words about me, ended my last illusion that Daniel was only lost for a while. Outside, dusk fell. Red-orange light spilling across the bare trees. I looked out the window of the interview room and realized my life had turned onto a road from which there was no return. A few days later, I received a call from Detective Harris. His voice came through the phone. Steady and firm, Nancy. We have enough evidence the cookie sample contains aconitum. The vial you found, the indirect recording, and the journal. The court has signed an arrest warrant for Daniel. We'll move this afternoon. I stood frozen in my familiar kitchen, my hand gripping the phone until it went white. My chest ached, as if a blade cut with every breath. I'd known this moment would come. But when it actually arrived, my heart still wasn't ready. Do I need to be there? I asked, voice trembling. It's not required. But if you want, you can come along. Either way, you deserve to witness it. Harris replied. That afternoon, I sat in the passenger seat of an unmarked police car, my insides tied in knots. The road to Daniel's house was familiar, yet an unfamiliar gloom hung over it. The car stopped a short distance away. I sat still, watching the patrol lights flicker through the trees. Harris turned to me. "Serious, we'll be quick. Stay in the car." I nodded. But my eyes couldn't leave the gray brick house in the distance. The windows were shut, the curtains drawn, like every time I'd come before. No sound, no light. The whole house seemed to be holding its breath. At exactly 6 p.m., 2 more police cars pulled up quietly. Figures in blue moved swiftly and silently, like shadows. Harris led and knocked 3 crisp times. A tense silence. Then hinges creaked. Daniel appeared tall and thin, his face cold. "What is it?" His voice rang out evenly, with no surprise. Harris held up the warrant, his voice firm. "Daniel Parker, you are under arrest on charges of intentional poisoning. You have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney." I watched Daniel raise an eyebrow, then slowly lift his hands. No resistance. No argument. The officers cuffed him. The metal glinted coldly in the sunset. I expected anger, or at least confusion, but there was none. Daniel remained calm, a faint smile on his lips. His eyes flicked to Harris, then landed on me, as if he'd known I was there all along. That look made my heart clench. Then he spoke in a low, clear voice, loud enough for me to hear from the car. "You always thought you knew me, but you never really understood." I choked. My chest felt squeezed. His words weren't a shout, not an accusation, just quiet. But they cut deep. A wound that made my blood run cold. I pressed my hand to my chest to hold back the tears. In that moment, the boy Daniel once was came back to me, the child who laughed when he caught lightning bugs in the yard, who sat for hours building Legos on the floor, who gripped my hand when he was afraid of the dark. And now, in that same face, the cold eyes and the words made me tremble to my core. The officers led Daniel to the car. He didn't struggle. He walked slowly, head held high, as if the person being escorted was the one in control. I watched until the vehicle disappeared, my heart heavy and hollow. Harris turned back and opened the car door for me. "Nancy, are you all right?" I shook my head, my voice hoarse. "No, but I know this had to be done." The police car carrying Daniel drove away, leaving dust lingering in the dying light. I sat, motionless, watching until it was gone. Inside me, a vast emptiness opened. Harris put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You were braver than many would be. If not for you, things could have been much worse." I nodded but said nothing. I knew this pain could not be shared. The one they had cuffed was my son, my blood, but he was also the person who had prepared to take my life. Night fell. The red of the sunset faded into thick blue-black. I rested my head against the car window, Daniel's last words echoing, "You never really understood." Maybe he was right. I hadn't truly understood. But now I had to accept it. The days that followed passed like a long, fevered dream. I lost count of how many times I sat silently in Linda's hospital room, listening to the monitor beeping steadily like a fragile soundtrack between life and death. Each time she opened her eyes, I would clasp her frail hand and whisper, "Linda, I'm sorry. It's all my fault." She blinked, her lips trembling, but never once in blame. In that moment, I realized forgiveness had a shape, the weak yet steady gaze that seemed to say, "We're still here. And that's enough." Day by day, Linda slowly recovered. Her voice was weak but steady, her hand trembling yet firm when it held mine. The doctors said she had escaped death by the narrowest margin. I listened, my chest tightening. If I had eaten that cookie, I might not be here at all. Every time I stood by her bed, I remembered Daniel's eyes, the chilling calm when the cuffs closed around his wrists, and his words echoed in me like a curse. I kept asking myself, could I have done anything differently to keep him from walking this path? But I knew the answer would never come. Some abysses had been carved long ago, I just hadn't seen them. One afternoon, when Linda could finally sit up and sip tea, I left the hospital with a quiet decision. Back home, I opened the fireproof box I'd kept for years. It usually held important papers, insurance, contracts, a few old photographs. I cleared a space and placed 2 items inside the birthday card that read, "Happy Birthday, Mom. Let's begin again." And the last cookie, carefully sealed in the evidence bag the police had returned to me. I shut the lid, turned the key, and set it on the highest shelf in the closet. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder that some forms of love, if not faced with clear eyes, can turn into blades. A reminder that the truth, however painful, must be confronted. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. I hadn't written in it for years. Not since Daniel left. But this time, my trembling hand released words that were raw and true. Motherly love cannot cover up the truth. Sometimes, love doesn't mean forgiveness, but the courage to confront and to stop. Because if I had stayed silent, I might not still be here to tell the tale. I wrote, then paused for a long time, staring at each word. Tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink. I closed the journal, set it in the drawer, and blew out the lamp. In the darkness, the house was silent. But in that silence, I felt alive. I still had breath. I could still care for a friend like Linda. I could still tell my own story. I knew the wound would never fully heal. But at least I had chosen to stand up. I hadn't let maternal love become a veil to cover evil. And that, bitter as it was also a form of love, the kind that dares to say, enough. I share this story not for pity, but to remind myself and anyone listening that sometimes in a family, love does not mean silence. Sometimes the only way to protect those bonds is to rise up, to speak the truth, even if it makes your heart bleed. If it were you, in that moment, what would you do? Stay silent to preserve an illusion? Or choose the truth to protect yourself and those around you? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Please share your answer in the comments, because every story, every reflection, might become a source of strength for someone out there enduring the same pain. And if this story touched your heart, please follow the channel, Shattered Trust, so we can walk together through other stories, journeys of family, of loss. But above all, of the courage to reclaim dignity and justice within the walls of our own homes.